My mother-in-law smiled when she handed me the phone. I didn't. It was our 1-year anniversary dinner. 31 people seated around 2 long tables pushed together in my mother-in-law's dining room, candles lit, wine poured, my husband's entire family watching me unwrap what she called a little something I put together for the occasion. She said it loud enough for everyone to hear. She always did everything loud enough for everyone to hear. I looked down at the phone in my hand. It was her phone, an older model, the screen slightly cracked in the upper left corner. The voice memo app was open. There was one recording saved. The timestamp said it was 3 hours and 47 minutes long. The file name was my name. My husband laughed nervously beside me. His mother was still smiling. The room was quiet in that specific way. Rooms get quiet when everyone is waiting to see what the woman at the center of the table is going to do. I pressed play. But I'm getting ahead of myself. To understand what happened that night, you have to understand what the 11 months before it looked like. My husband and I got married on a Saturday in October. Small ceremony, backyard of his aunt's house in Naperville. I wore my mother's earrings. My husband cried when he saw me walk down the aisle, which made me cry, which made his cousin cry, which made the whole thing feel like exactly what I'd always wanted. Quiet, real, ours. His mother stood in the front row, in a cream-colored dress that was technically not white, but was technically not white either. And she hugged me after the ceremony and said, "I always pictured something a little bigger for Ryan, but this is sweet." I told myself she meant it kindly. I told myself that for a long time about a lot of things she said. Her name was Carol. She was 61, retired after 28 years as an office manager. And she had what I can only describe as a gift for making you feel like a guest in your own life. She had opinions about everything: how I loaded the dishwasher, how I cut vegetables, whether the throw pillows in our living room were the right shade of gray. She shared these opinions freely and often, always framed as helpfulness, always delivered with a smile that made it impossible to push back without looking like the difficult one. My husband, I'll call him Daniel, loved his mother genuinely and without question. That was one of the things I'd loved about him when we were dating. He called her every Sunday. He remembered her coworkers' names even after she'd retired. He drove 40 minutes to fix her garbage disposal when she could have called a plumber. He was, in almost every way, a devoted son. The problem was that devotion, somewhere along the way, had quietly become compliance. He didn't always agree with her. He just almost never said so out loud. The first time I noticed it was about 2 months after the wedding. Carol had offered to help us redecorate our guest bedroom, and I'd said yes because I thought she meant choosing a paint color together, not showing up on a Tuesday with a truckload of her own furniture, and announcing that she'd always found our existing pieces a bit cold. When I mentioned it to Daniel that evening, gently, he nodded and said, "That's just how she shows love. She means well." He went back to watching television. I stood in the doorway of a guest bedroom that no longer looked like ours, and told myself it was fine. By the time summer came, I had told myself it was fine approximately 240 times. Fine when she forwarded parenting articles to both of us before we'd even discussed having children. Fine when she called Daniel on our anniversary weekend and he stepped out for 40 minutes to take it. Fine when she mentioned at a family dinner that she hoped I was eating more protein because I looked tired and thin. I smiled. I passed the rolls. I was fine. What I was not fine about, what I could not make myself be fine about no matter how many times I tried, was the money. 3 months into our marriage, Daniel and I had opened a joint savings account. It was meant for a down payment on a house, something we'd been talking about seriously, a house in a neighborhood about 20 minutes from where we were renting. We each set up automatic transfers every month. We didn't touch it. We didn't talk about it at family dinners. As far as anyone else knew, it didn't exist. In July, I logged into our account to check the balance and found it was short. Not a little short. $4,000 short. I sat at the kitchen table and stared at the screen for a long time. I checked the transaction history. There was a transfer, dated 2 weeks earlier, to an account I didn't recognize. No note. No explanation. Just gone. I called Daniel immediately. He picked up on the second ring. I told him what I'd found. There was a pause. the kind of pause that is not the pause of someone who doesn't know what you're talking about. "I was going to tell you," he said. He had lent the money to his mother. She'd had an unexpected expense, he said, a roof repair, she'd told him, an estimate that came in higher than expected. She was going to pay it back. He'd meant to mention it. He'd just been waiting for the right time. I asked him why he hadn't talked to me first. He said he hadn't wanted to make a big deal out of it. He said she was family. He said it would be back in the account within 60 days. It was not back within 60 days. I asked him about it once, at 90 days. He said she was still sorting out the insurance claim. I asked him again at 120 days. He said he'd talked to her, and she was working on it. At 150 days, I stopped asking. Not because I'd given up. Because I was watching something very carefully, and I needed to keep watching without showing my hand. I want to be clear about something. I am not a dramatic person. I do not enjoy conflict. What I am is organized. What I am is patient. And what I had started to notice was a pattern. The roof story never quite added up. Carol owned her home outright had for 15 years. The supposed repair was never mentioned again. Not once, in any conversation at any family dinner. There were no contractors referenced, no insurance adjusters complained about, no follow-up of any kind. More than that, in the months after the transfer, Carol had new deck furniture. Carol had a weekend trip to Scottsdale with her friend from her old office. Carol had, as far as I could observe, absolutely no financial distress of any kind. I said nothing. I watched. In August, I started keeping notes. Not because I planned to use them or not yet, but because writing things down helped me think clearly, and I needed to think very clearly. Dates, amounts, statements Daniel made, statements Carol made, the gaps between them. A roof repair that cost exactly $4,000 and left no trace except in our savings account. I also, without telling anyone, started paying closer attention to the other things. The way Carol asked questions that sounded like small talk, but were really inventory checks. How much did we pay for the car? How was my job going? Had we looked at any houses lately? The way she always seemed to know things Daniel hadn't mentioned yet, which meant either Daniel was talking to her more than I knew, or she had other sources of information. The way, at our house, she moved through rooms with an ease that didn't quite match the role of guest. In September, I found out which one it was. I came home early from work on a Thursday my last appointment had canceled, and I'd decided to stop by the grocery store and then come straight home. I pulled into the driveway and saw Carol's car parked in front of the house. I didn't think much of it. She stopped by sometimes. I let myself in through the front door and heard her voice coming from the kitchen. She was on the phone. The kitchen door was half open, and she hadn't heard me come in, and I stood in the hallway for a moment before she said something that stopped me completely still. She was talking about me. Not generally. Specifically, she was telling whoever was on the other end of the call that I had no idea how to manage money, that I walked all over Daniel, that I had no real family values, and that she was seriously worried about what kind of mother I would be. She said this last part with a certainty that I found remarkable, given that I was not pregnant and had not discussed children with her in any substantive way. Then she said something that I have thought about many times since. She said, "I've been keeping track. I have everything I need." I stood in that hallway for another full minute. Then I went back out the front door as quietly as I'd come in, sat in my car, and called the grocery store. I told myself I'd misheard. I drove to the store. I bought chicken and spinach, and a bottle of wine I did not open that night. I went home an hour later and found Carol gone, and a note on the counter in her handwriting saying she'd stopped by to drop off a casserole, which was in the refrigerator. There was no casserole in the refrigerator. I want to be very careful here not to overstate what I knew at that point. I didn't know exactly what she meant by keeping track. I didn't know what everything she needed referred to. What I knew was this. She had been in my home alone. She had been on the phone discussing me in terms that were neither kind nor accurate, and she had left a note describing an errand that had not occurred. That was what I knew. What I did, starting the next morning, was something very simple. I bought a small digital voice recorder, the kind people use for interviews and lectures, and I put it in the kitchen, tucked into the back of the cabinet above the refrigerator, behind a box of cereal. I put another one in the living room, behind a row of books we never touched. I told myself I was probably being paranoid. I told myself I would probably listen to 40 hours of nothing and feel foolish. I did not feel foolish. I won't go through all of it. Some of it was mundane, the sound of footsteps, cabinet doors, the television. But there were 3 separate occasions between September and December where Carol was in our home while Daniel and I were both at work. And on each of those occasions she was on the phone, and on each of those occasions she was talking about me. The calls were variations on the same theme. That I was secretive. That I was pulling Daniel away from his family. That I was not the right fit, and that she had always known it. On the 3rd call, she said to whoever she was talking to, and I have listened to this particular recording enough times that I have it memorized. I have 3 months of it now. Everything she says, everything she does. When the time is right, I'm going to sit him down and show him exactly who he married. She was going to present it to Daniel. She was going to sit my husband down and play recordings of my private conversations in my own home to convince him to leave me. I am going to tell you now what I felt when I understood that, fully, sitting in my car in the parking lot of my office on a Wednesday morning in December. I felt something go very quiet inside me. Not cold, not angry, quiet. The kind of quiet that comes when you have been worried about something for a long time, and then the thing reveals itself and there is nothing left to worry about because now you simply know. I knew what she had. I had what she had. And I had something else besides. I did not tell Daniel. I thought about it. I turned it over from every angle. The way you turn something fragile over before you decide where to set it down. I decided that telling him in private, without witnesses, without anything to show him, would give Carol exactly what she wanted. A conversation in which it was my word against hers, and she had been building credibility with him his entire life. I decided I needed the right moment. The anniversary dinner was her idea. She offered to host it, said she wanted to celebrate us, said she'd invite the family because a marriage is a family milestone, not just a couple's thing. Daniel thought it was generous. I said that sounded lovely. I started getting ready 3 weeks in advance. The day before the dinner, I copied the 3 recordings, the relevant portions, the parts where she named me by name, the part where she described her plan onto my own phone. I also copied something else, a photograph of our bank statement from July, showing the $4,000 transfer, and a second photograph I'd taken 6 weeks earlier of Carol's Venmo account, which I'd seen open on her phone when she left it face up on our kitchen table. The Venmo history showed a payment dated the same week as our transfer, sent to a name I recognized as her friend, the one she'd gone to Scottsdale with. The roof repair. Paid to a friend. Via Venmo. I put my phone in my purse, and I went to the anniversary dinner in a green dress that Daniel said made my eyes look nice. The evening went exactly as I expected it to go for the first 2 hours. Dinner was good. The wine was good. People gave small toasts. Carol sat at the head of the table and smiled the way she always smiled. Proprietary, pleased, the smile of someone who believes the event belongs to them because they planned it. Then she stood up and said she had a little something she wanted to share with me personally, a gift, something she'd put together over the past several months. And she walked to where I was sitting and placed her phone in my hand with the voice memo app open. The file name was my name. I looked at it. 3 hours and 47 minutes. She had edited it down, then, from what I had estimated was closer to 6 hours of usable material. She had curated it, chosen her best moments. She had prepared this presentation carefully and she was giving it to me first, in front of 31 people, because she wanted me to know that she had won before anyone else in the room understood what was happening. My husband laughed nervously beside me. He didn't know what it was. He just saw his mother handing me a phone and smiled, the automatic smile. He always smiled when he didn't know what else to do. I looked at Carol. She was still standing, still smiling, waiting for me to look confused, waiting for me to look afraid. I pressed play. Her voice came out of the phone speaker, and because the room was quiet, it carried. It was her 3rd call, the one I had memorized. The one where she said she had 3 months of everything and was going to show Daniel exactly who he married. The words were clear. The voice was unmistakably hers. The plan she described was unambiguous. She froze. Not the way people freeze in movies, it was smaller than that, and worse. It was the specific stillness of someone who has just watched the floor drop out from under them and hasn't yet decided whether to pretend it hasn't. Her smile was still technically on her face, but her eyes were doing something else entirely. I let it play for 45 seconds. Then I stopped it. I set the phone down on the table in front of me, very gently, the way you set something down when you have decided you are done with it. I looked at Daniel. He was not laughing anymore. He was looking at his mother with an expression I had never seen on his face before. Not anger exactly, not yet, but the particular look of someone who has just been asked to reconsider something they thought was settled. I said, quietly, "I have mine too, if you'd like to hear it." I took my own phone out of my purse. I opened the voice memo app. I had labeled my recording with a date. I set it on the table next to hers. Nobody spoke for a moment. Then Carol said my name, once, in a voice that had lost its certainty. And I said, just as quietly, "I also have the bank statement. And the Venmo." The room had been quiet before. Now it was a different kind of quiet, the kind that happens when 30 people simultaneously recalibrate everything they've been watching for the last 2 hours. Daniel's aunt, who was sitting 3 seats down, said Carol, in a tone that was not a question. Carol sat down. I did not make a scene. I did not cry. I did not list every grievance or explain every piece of evidence, or make anyone choose a side that night. I had 1 glass of water. I said goodnight to the people I liked, and Daniel drove us home in a silence that was not hostile, but was very, very full. We talked until almost 3 in the morning. I showed him everything, the recordings, the bank statement, the Venmo screenshot, the notes I'd kept. I did not perform it, and I did not cushion it. I just laid it out in order, the way you lay out evidence when you want someone to be able to see it clearly. He listened. He asked questions. He didn't defend her, which surprised me. Or maybe it didn't. Maybe some part of him had been watching too, and waiting, and hoping he was wrong. He called Carol the next morning. I wasn't in the room for it, but I could hear his voice from the hallway, measured, certain, none of the automatic softening I was used to. When he came out, he looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with not sleeping. He said, "I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner." I told him I didn't need him to have seen it sooner. I needed him to see it now. He did. That was 8 months ago. Carol and I have not spoken since the dinner. Daniel calls her occasionally. I don't ask what they discuss, and he doesn't tell me unless he wants to. The $4,000 was returned in 2 installments, without a note. We put it back in the savings account, and we are closing on a house in April, the one in the neighborhood we'd always talked about, 20 minutes from where we used to rent. I think about the dinner sometimes. I think about what Carol expected to happen when she placed that phone in my hand. She had spent 3 months building something she thought was a weapon. She had dressed it up and hosted a dinner around it and waited for the perfect moment to use it. She had not considered, at any point, that I had been building something too. People like Carol count on silence. They count on you being too polite, too uncertain, too afraid of looking like the difficult one. They build their plans on the assumption that you will absorb what they do and smile and say nothing, the way you've been doing for months, the way you've been trained to do. What they don't count on is that sometimes the person they're recording is also recording. Sometimes the person they're presenting evidence against has evidence of her own. Sometimes the woman sitting across the table from you has been paying attention to every single thing you've done, and she has been patient and she has been quiet. And sometimes she is done being quiet. If you're carrying something like this, a relationship that feels like it has a ceiling on it, a person in your life who moves through your space like they own it, a pattern you've been watching but haven't yet named, I want you to know that patience is not weakness. Watching is not giving up. Knowing when to speak and what to say when you do is not the same as having nothing to say. I spent 11 months being fine. I spent 3 months paying attention. I needed 30 seconds. Thank you for being here with me today. If this story stayed with you, I hope you'll share it with someone who might need to hear it. And if you have your own story, a moment where you finally stopped being quiet, I'd really like to hear it. Leave it in the comments. I read everyone.